On August 5, 2025, Ontario Premier Doug Ford stunned North America by halting all provincial steel exports to the United States. The move, a direct response to years of unpredictable U.S. trade policies, sent shockwaves through the cross-border supply chain. Hamilton's steel mills and Detroit's auto plants, once seamlessly connected, were suddenly cut off. In Washington, outrage erupted. Donald Trump, eyeing another presidential run, blasted Canada as a traitor and threatened severe retaliation. The dispute quickly escalated from a trade spat to a political showdown, with jobs and industries on both sides at risk. This wasn't an isolated event. Years of simmering tensions and aggressive negotiations had eroded trust between the two countries. The steel industry, vital to both economies, became the flashpoint. Ontario's decision was a bold gamble, signaling that Canada would no longer accept the old rules. The fallout was immediate. U.S. manufacturing stocks plunged, and factories scrambled for alternatives. In Ontario, steelworkers watched anxiously, torn between pride and uncertainty. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the very foundations of the U.S. Canada relationship. One province's decisive action had ignited a continental crisis. To grasp Ontario's move, you need to understand its steel industry's deep roots. Cities like Hamilton and Sault Ste. Marie aren't just industrial hubs, they're communities built around the mills, with generations forging high-quality steel. This sector supports tens of thousands of jobs and powers the Canadian economy. Ontario's steel is crucial for the U.S. auto sector, especially in Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. For decades, a seamless supply chain linked Ontario's mills to Detroit's assembly lines, with trucks crossing the border daily. The relationship was mutually beneficial. U.S. automakers got reliable, specialized steel. Canada gained stability and prosperity. Many car parts crossed the border multiple times before final assembly, making North America a manufacturing powerhouse. This integration was cemented by the 1960s Auto Pact, uniting workers and industries across the Great Lakes. When Ontario cut exports, it didn't just halt a commodity, it disrupted a century-old partnership. The move fractured an economic artery that had defined the region. Workers on both sides felt the shock. Americans faced layoffs, Canadians faced an uncertain future. The decision was about more than trade. It was about identity, pride, and the future of North American industry. The ripple effects would be felt far beyond the factory floor. The question now: could this partnership survive such a rupture, or was this the end of an era? The roots of this crisis stretch back to Trump's presidency. In 2018, his administration slapped 25% tariffs on steel imports, including from Canada, citing national security. Ottawa was stunned. Canada, a close ally, was now treated as a threat. Canada hit back with its own tariffs, sparking a damaging trade war. Ontario's steel became pricier for U.S. buyers, putting Canadian mills at a disadvantage. Even after some exemptions, the threat of tariffs lingered, creating constant uncertainty. Trump's America First doctrine aimed to protect U.S. jobs, but it destabilized cross-border industries. The renegotiated USMCA didn't end the tension. Tariffs remained a weapon. Canadian businesses felt like pawns, never knowing when the next blow would fall. Ontario's 2025 export halt was the breaking point, a refusal to operate under perpetual threat. The province chose control over chaos, even at a cost. Years of instability had finally forced Canada's hand. The message: Canada would no longer be bullied by unpredictable U.S. trade policy. The fallout was swift and global. Amid the turmoil, Ford Motor Company made a game-changing move in late 2024. Instead of building its next electric crossover in the U.S., Ford chose Oakville, Ontario for production. The investment promised thousands of Canadian jobs and cemented Canada's role in electric vehicle manufacturing. U.S. states lost out, and protectionist politicians fumed. Ford's decision was strategic. Canada offered financial incentives, stability, and a reliable supply chain. The constant threat of U.S. tariffs made Canada the safer bet for long-term investment. Ontario's access to battery minerals like lithium and nickel was another draw. Canada's mines-to-mobility strategy aimed to create a full EV ecosystem. Ford's move was a vote of confidence in Canadian industrial policy and a warning to Washington. Protectionism had backfired, pushing a U.S. icon north. Ford needed predictable steel supplies free from tariff chaos. In the end, global companies craved stability, and the U.S. was no longer providing it. Trump's response to Ontario's steel halt was instant and incendiary. From Mar-a-Lago, he blasted Canada on social media, calling the move a betrayal and threatening massive new tariffs. He conflated Premier Ford with Ford Motor Company, fueling confusion and outrage. Trump's rhetoric was calculated to rally his base and stoke nationalist anger. He promised a 50% tariff on Canadian cars if he were president, turning the crisis into a political spectacle. His supporters demanded retaliation, while critics blamed his own policies for the chaos. The public debate became a loyalty test, deepening polarization. U.S. automakers and manufacturers were caught in the crossfire, facing real supply chain crises. The focus shifted from solutions to blame. Trump's outburst made compromise harder, pushing both countries further apart. The trade dispute was now a full-blown political firestorm. On the ground, the impact was immediate and personal. In Toledo, Ohio, auto workers faced layoffs as steel shipments from Ontario stopped. Hopes that tariffs would protect jobs had turned into lost paychecks and uncertainty. In Hamilton, Ontario, steelworkers felt pride in standing up to the U.S., but anxiety about the future lingered. Local conversations mixed defiance with worry. Was this the right fight, or just more hardship? Small U.S. manufacturers like a Michigan parts supplier were in crisis. Their business depended on cross-border steel. Now, contracts and jobs were at risk. Political rhetoric felt distant from their daily struggles. Canadian consumers too felt the pinch. Higher prices on U.S. goods, rising grocery bills, and growing unease. The trade war's costs were everywhere, with no clear winners. Both sides questioned if the standoff was worth the pain. The reality, in a trade war, everyone loses something. With supply chains in chaos and tempers flaring, de-escalation was urgent. Leaders in Washington and Ottawa needed to talk, privately, not on social media. A temporary truce, Ontario resuming some steel exports, the U.S. pausing new tariffs, could calm the crisis. Long-term, both countries had to rebuild trust and modernize trade rules. Strengthening USMCA's dispute resolution and creating independent arbitration panels would help prevent future flare-ups. Recognizing the deep integration of their economies was crucial. Instead of zero-sum thinking, leaders needed a collaborative approach, especially in strategic sectors like EVs and critical minerals. A joint U.S. Canada Council could secure North American supply chains and boost global competitiveness. The future depended on partnership, not rivalry. Only by rebuilding trust could both nations avoid mutual decline and restore prosperity.